Hey everybody, welcome.
Hello.
See if let everybody get in here.
My name is Segovia Smith, for anybody who doesn't know, getting weird looks from Wayne over there. So we are going to be kicking off a new Thursday evening every week, not with the Prompt Vault. That was Tuesday, if you missed the memo. We had a really rock star group on Tuesday morning that started off, and I see some familiar faces today. And Chris Lannon, as you may have heard, is taking over this call. We're going to be doing automations. We're going to be rolling up our sleeves. We're going to get into some stuff. We want to hear from you. So if you ever see something, say something, tell me, drop me a message, DM me, let us know, what you like about what we're doing and what you want to see more of. And with that, I will pass the floor to Chris.
Hey everybody, I recognize most of you from earlier today. So let me share my screen here. We had a member of the community post a question about web scraping. So I figured I'd cover that. Web scraping with Make.com, which is a no-code automation platform. I hope most of you are familiar with it. I know I recognize some of you from the other call. So let's see here. So I don't think I need to cover what Make is. What this guy wanted to do was he's basically scraping websites and looking at some specific insights about the website, a business website, and then he was trying to figure out how to get email addresses and contact information from those websites if they were available. And he had specific questions about like he could scrape a website with a GPT, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't figure out how to do it in Make because he was trying to do a ChatGPT completion in Make. And the way it works in Make is you basically have to do it in 2 steps. So we'll cover that. So you basically scrape the content and then you throw that into ChatGPT as context. Everybody knows what ChatGPT is, right? So why would you combine them? So you take the information you can find about a business, including what's on the website, and you can pull all the data from that website, throw it into ChatGPT, and then ask ChatGPT questions about that, or have it do some whatever you want it to do with it. So you could do marketing research with that data. You could customize the data. So you're going to reach out to those people with cold email. You could use the information on their website to personalize that email. You could scrape LinkedIn profiles to personalize cold email outreach. And that's basically what we would use it for. I guess I just covered this part. Personalized content. You could use it in the case of a chatbot. You could have the chatbot go out and say if a customer said, my website is this, you could have the chatbot go out and scrape that website really quick, pull the context in, and then it would have some information about that customer's business, and you could chat intelligently or semi-intelligently with that customer. Analyze marketing trends. The example that I'm going to give is I'm going to have ChatGPT assume the role of a marketing copywriter, basically. It's going to analyze the homepage of that website and then make suggestions on what can be improved based on a framework that I'm going to ask ChatGPT about. And then you could scrape and store this information in databases. A lot of cold outreach people use it to pull email addresses and data about different companies. And you could match up that data with other databases to pull together a whole portfolio of information. Do most people know how to set up a Make account? Have you guys set up the free Make account? Okay. Let me do my chat here.
I haven't done it yet, but I'm sure I can figure it out.
So I see also Curtis has said not yet. Who is speaking out loud there just for a second?
Oh, there it is.
That was Sherry. Yeah, that was Sherry.
Sherry?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if you have not, just say no in the chat or put a 0, just so we can kind of get a gauge for how many people, don't yet have Make. Obviously, if you don't have a Make account right now, I'd say trying to scramble and make one right now while the training call is going on is probably not a good use of your time. Take notes, focus, and then, afterwards you can go get your Make account, and you can always come back to the replay. And, if you want to follow along, I don't exactly know all the details. Chris is going to take us on the yellow brick road here, but my guess would be, there'll be some breadcrumbs, and if you want to paint by numbers and follow along later, you could do that.
I'm going to assume that you've set up your Make account and also that you have the ChatGPT Plus account that costs $20 a month, and with that you can get an API key that you can plug in to make the
Would
make
you
modules
say,
to.
Chris, these are probably fundamental ingredients if you're going to get value out of these calls going forward?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you definitely.
and if there are other tools, maybe in your announcement, you could just throw like, here's another tool that we might be covering in the future. Like, let's just say in 5 weeks' time, we want to do something different. In the
Okay.
kind of trailer, you could just say, hey, everybody, if you don't already have a paid account in this, go get it before we start on the call. You have a hand up, Curtis. You want to make a quick question?
Yeah, just quick comment. This is actually something I chatted about 30 seconds ago over this. One of the things that I love the calls. I think one of the things that I think that's missing, and it kind of follows a customary meeting agenda format, whereby, of course, you kind of generally put the agenda of topics. But one thing I've seen that's slowing me down, I don't know if anyone else, but when there's prerequisites that make sense to do prior to, it's just a little bit of housekeeping to tell us, hey, to make the most out of this call, have these 4, 5, 3, 2, whatever number of things done. So then we actually, in effect, satisfy, I think, the meeting presenter's agenda, and they're not having to sit there and be, hampered, or the other attendees. So I think just in a short future improvement, if we could just start putting that in the context of the meeting, the prerequisites to have it be a successful meeting.
You have been heard, Curtis, and that's why I made the little announcement. So,
Yeah.
in good time, we'll raise the bar across all of the calls, but we'll definitely start seeing more of that.
Great,
And
thank you.
actually, Chris Landon is kind of leading the charge in that he's even putting out in advance, like, here's a little video on what to expect. So
I love it.
Yeah, I think I'll include that in my video too, like what the
Right.
prerequisites are. That's a great idea.
Because if we get 5 weeks into this and we're like way advanced, the prerequisite might be like, go back 5 weeks ago and step your way through, we'll end the series after a certain number of weeks if we're working on a week by week sequential kind of build out. I think for now, it might just be week to week, but as we get more complicated, it might be daisy chaining a few lessons together.
And the only last comment quick is we owe it to the presenter to not be a bunch of dummies in the room just staring at the screen and the program in general. So thank you. Appreciate the talking about that.
Thank you. Advanced features, I'm not going to cover these today, but I'm just going to do a basic web scraping scenario, but I will probably, if we have time, show you how to do a little error handling. So with every API call, you probably want to put the minimal amount of error handling on those modules so that if there's a failure, that it'll keep retrying, so you can set the number of retries. So like if you're doing an API call to ChatGPT and OpenAI is having problems with the API and it fails, then you can just keep retrying. So,
hey Chris, is that in general guideline, or as applies to just the scenario we're building now?
In general, it's pretty standard practice to do that. So what I have here is, let me clear this out. So in this scenario, say I want to get information about plumbing companies. I would just Google local plumbing companies and come up with, say, a list of 5. So I would just cut and paste those URLs in a spreadsheet. So I have the spreadsheet set up for URL, product service, improvements and suggestions. And then if we have time, I'll see if I can find an email address on the page. But typically people don't put their email addresses on the homepage for that reason, because people scrape the information and have a tendency to spam. So I'm just going to use these 3 columns for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through make. I'm going to read this sheet one row at a time. So I'm going to read this URL. I'm going to have ChatGPT evaluate the product and service and tell me what product and service that business offers. It's going to read all the copy on the page, and then it's going to suggest improvements. And first, what I would do is go to ChatGPT, because I want a framework for that analysis. I would say, assume the role of a marketing expert and copywriter. What framework would I use to suggest improvements for copy on the homepage of a website? Well, it's going to pick the ADA framework, which is pretty standard: attention, interest, desire, and action. So I'm going to let that generate that. So I've created a new scenario. I want to read that Google Sheet. So I'm going to get a range from that sheet. So it's going to start with this module. It's already got my Google connection in here, so it connects to my Google account. I'm going to choose that sheet from my Google Drive.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to do anything special to connect to your Google Sheet?
I did
There's
to my
actually a couple
Google.
of different, yeah, there's a couple different ways of doing it. So
Yeah, to my Google account.
Mhm.
Basically, you click this add button, and it'll walk you through the process of logging into your Google account with your Google login.
okay.
And you only have to do that once. And then once that's done, you have this connection that's ready to go every time.
Chris, this is correct. I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
The aim is, are we going to do one specific website to scrap, or we have a bunch of sites that we can, choose like 10 of them or 20 of them, or
I have 5 here.
oh,
I'm gonna
this is the list. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with one. I'm gonna run it one time just to make sure it works, and then I'll have it go down the list of all of these.
Well, is that like a one shot? You can give the bunch of list from the, pick up all the sites from the Excel sheet, something like that, right? So it's not like you have to manually pick up each.
Yeah,
and
I
every-
can do it by range. So down here, if I want to do this range, I do it from A2 to A6, right? So column 1,
Okay.
row. So I can put this range in here. Whoops. So I could say A1 to A6, and it'll read them all at once and put them into an array. But I'm just going to start with A1 to start. So if I run this, so it picked up A1, which is the header, because I have the first column is this URL. It needs to be A2. That's where the actual data is. So if I run this, you can see it picked up the URL there. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to store that in a variable with the set variable module. And I could this is just to make it easier to understand. I'm going to say set URL variable. I'm going to call this URL. And then I'm going to pull this value from the A column in this previous module. So as you see, I roll over this, it's telling you that this is coming from this module. So I've set that variable. Now that URL variable has that URL in it from the spreadsheet. So if I look at it, I've got the URL there.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. How did you do?
Mhm.
You just clicked that A2, or how did you select that?
So it'll give you a list of everything that's in the previous modules. And you can see the preview here. That's the data. I just hit that tag and it shows up there.
Thank you.
Now I actually want to take steps to start scraping the website. And I'm going to start with the HTTP module, but I'm going to resolve the target URL. And this is just a step to, in the event that the URL I'm going to is forwarded, it's going to resolve it. It's going to keep resolving it until it gets to the end of all the forwards. And it's just a really simple step.
Are you validating that it comes up in this step, meaning to say you want to be sure it launches? Is that what that's?
Yeah,
Well,
and so in the event that it checked the URL and that URL was forwarding to, say, a different URL, it'll resolve it all the way through to the ended forwarded URL.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then the next one is I'm just going to make a request. And this is the part that gets the data. And I'm going to use that resolved URL. See, let me pull this over here. I'm going to use that resolved URL from the previous module. You see it's listing all the modules and they're the same color as these. And when I roll over them, you can see that it balloons. So I'm going to pick this one, and that's all I need for that one. Now I'm going to run it. It's resolving it. Now it's getting the content.
I actually felt smarter just watching you do it, Chris. That's a good thing.
So it's showing the input, everything that goes into the module and everything that comes out, and the data is where the information is. So here's the raw HTML, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You want to use this HTML to text. This is a text parser control. Use this HTML text to strip all the HTML out. That's all this does. So I'm going to take the data from the previous one, which is what we just scraped, and I'm putting it in the text parser. Now, if I run it again, it doesn't like this at the end of the module. It's one of the rules, but it'll run anyway.
When it gets to that, can you show us the identifier to where the text was, just the variable that you referred to?
Sure.
Just when it's done running.
So now this isn't HTML. This is actually something that we can understand. It's just text. That's everything on the home page.
Data.
I wish I could. I don't know why I can't move that.
It's more where the for data came from, that field identifier.
Yeah, so if I roll over this, you can see it's from this one.
Okay. So it had a data identifier at for that grouping of information.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. So next, now that we have the information, we're going to go to ChatGPT, which is this module, and we're going to do create a completion. And same with the Google Drive connection. I have my OpenAI connection already set up, and you would click add here, and it would request your API key. Once you have that set up, you click save, and then you've got this connection. You can name it whatever you want. So I'm going to create a chat completion, which is just basically like issuing a command in ChatGPT. I'm going to you can do the drop down here. You can select whatever model you want. And typically these models have a maximum token limit of 4096 per request. I just happen to know that from the API documentation. Want to add a message here. I'm going to do a user message. I'm going to say, please give me the name and product of this business. Here is the website information. And I'll designate the beginning and end of the data. So I'll say, and then I'm going to take that text.
Is that a typo there? And website data or data?
Oops. Yep.
Thank you.
I'm going to take the text from the text parser. That's the plain text after we remove the HTML from the previous module, and insert it in there so it has the website data. So let's run this.
So was that like the prompt you was giving ChatGPT? Is that what that was?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I'll open that module again and show it to you. I'm just basically giving it the prompt, and then I'm taking the scraped data and putting it in there with the prompt, and the output shows up in this message here, and it's giving me information about the business and what services they offer. But I'm gonna make that even more granular. I'm gonna say, so this is the prompt, and I'm prompting it as a user. I can say just give me the business name and the service, product, service only, nothing else. And I think I can run just this module with the existing data. Let's see. Oh, I have to put in the text. Let me do that real quick. And I'll just run it again. I don't want to make this too complicated. As these are running, you can click these little bubbles here, and you can see what's coming out of them. So here's the output. So that one got the URL. That one got the resolved URL, which is the end URL. This one did the request, came up with all the HTML. This one stripped the HTML, and then we threw that in to this prompt with the stripped version of the data. Oh wait, choices.
Did that use more tokens there? 9166 versus 4096 you had?
Yeah, it was 9166 on the input and 23 on the output. That's interesting. I guess maybe what I put in there doesn't matter. You can also leave that blank and it'll take whatever the default is. But if you look at the,
Would it tell you that in the end so you could kind of get educated as well, meaning that that variable would come back to you and kind of letting you know what your prompt usage is going to look like?
yeah, it's funny. I've never really noticed this usage. I don't really pay attention to it, but it's interesting that that's over what I put in there for the max.
A happy accident.
Yeah. So now it's just giving me the business name and the product and service. So what I can do is, now that I have that, I can put that here in this column. So I'll do that.
I'm assuming you could have had another feature that would have actually populated that cell automatically if you chose to.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do right now.
Oh, okay.
It's all right. So I'm going to go ahead and update this row. I'm going to rename it and say update business name, product, service. Actually, I can, I want to update the same sheet. So I'm going to enter it manually here. And I'm going to use the spreadsheet ID that I got from this first module, which is down here. I'm going to update the same spreadsheet. I'm just throwing that spreadsheet ID in there. And I think it's called sheet 1 is the tab, because it wants the tab. It wants to know what tab to update. I just call it sheet 1. Yeah. Row number is going to be 2. Column range is going to be B, right? It's going to be column B, row 2. I think that's right. Huh. Oh, there we go. B. I want to put that. So it's going to be row 2, and then in column B, I'm going to put the output from ChatGPT, which is the business name. So let's run this again.
So while running, I have another quick question. Why do we need the middle step resolving the URL, even though if it is already the name? In case if it is IP you wanted to resolve, or why do we need that step?
If the URL that you're putting in there gets forwarded to another URL, it's just going to pick up. It's not going to go to the end URL. It's just going to break at that point because it won't try to resolve it all the way to the end.
I see.
So now if we look at this for row 2, B2, I've updated the business name and the product and service. And then next I'm going to ask ChatGPT for improvement suggestions on the copy. So I'm going to do another ChatGPT chat completion. I'll leave max tokens blank this time to see what happens. I'm going to use GPT-4o again. I'm going to add a message. I'm going to be the user. And for message content, I'm going to say, assume the role of a marketing expert and expert marketing. Let's see, expert in marketing and copywriting. Please make suggestions, improvement suggestions. I'm going to insert this text again from this module over here. And then I'm going to tell it, I want you to use the following framework for your suggestions. And then I'm going to take this output from ChatGPT when I asked it about what it should use, and it came back with the ADA framework. I'm just going to put this here.
While you do that, let me just contextualize the question that came in from the chat. So Pam was asking, like, what would be the actual business use case? I mean, so let's just bring it back to, we're talking about building a web scraper, and this is very low level plumbing to like the really basics, and you can get far more advanced. But bringing it into the context of, let's say, a chief AI officer, or what even we're covering as early as Monday, today's Thursday, kind of weaving the tapestry of topics together. For those that were not on the Monday call, Andrew did a conversation around the bank method, which is a way to do kind of personality assessments. So let's say you're going to work in a CIO, you've got, an inbound lead, they're going to have a conversation. I mean, this can be for doing cold outreach, but it might just as easily be you're going to use the bank method to look at and scrape all the data off of the executive leadership team in LinkedIn for the people that you're about to go into a meeting for. And you've got a spreadsheet, and you're going to give them, like, here's the LinkedIn profiles of the 5 executives. It's going to do some pulling. It's going to do some polling. It's going to run them off of, instead of using the ADA method, it might use the bank method. And then it'll give you some feedback. And all you didn't need to go and do hours of research. You could just say, I'm going to look down column C or D, read a couple highlights. How do I communicate with these people so that I know in advance going into the room how I'm going to make, who my allies are going to be and how I can address those people. That would be just one example, but there are hundreds of different ways you could use a basic web scraping capability. Hopefully that answers your question, Pamela.
In this particular example, if I were, say I did websites, say I was a web designer and I was looking for prospects and I could create an email from this that said, hey, I checked out your website and I noticed that you have these issues with it. And here are some suggestions that I would make. And you just give them a complete report on it and say, would you like me to make these changes for you? And so that would be a way to do cold outreach to get clients to improve their websites.
We get inbounds with SEO for that almost weekly.
Can you
Right.
go to the top there in the green there? Yeah, back there you had the chat, assume the role, content. Let me see. You cut and paste all that in there, or
Yeah,
okay,
I
there
want
it
you to
is.
use the following framework. I just cut and pasted the ADA framework
Okay,
that I got from
previous.
this ChatGPT output here.
Yeah, that was the question that I guess you're answering it, but if you're in the end trying to mimic and model kind of your knowledge base and then leverage, say, best practices, you may be using that to generate the follow-up or the call to action or the value prop, I should say, for what you want to effectively say what you can do for them. Is that a
Right.
reasonable statement?
Yeah, and you could completely automate it. Just, here, I noticed you're making these mistakes. I'd be happy to fix that for you for free. And then maybe you could upsell them on some design services or something. But it could also be a great lead magnet too, where you take intake from a form, they just put in their website URL and it spits out the ADA suggestions for them. For this, I'm going to say, please provide your output in markdown format, starting with H1 header information or H1 header. I'm going to say starting with company name and then followed by 3 header with product and service, and then make the report. I guess it would be regular text. Just say followed by the report. So I should get an output in markdown format, which is formatting code that is pretty popular. And then from that, I can convert that to HTML. And from that, I can create a Google Doc from it. But I'll generate this and then I'll update this improvement suggestions here. I'll also create a Google Doc out of that as well. So we'll run this. This little auto align is pretty handy. If you hit this, it'll format all of your modules so they look nice. You can end up with a pretty big mess if you're just dragging things around.
I like your FOMO approach there, Chris. If you actually offered it as would you like me to fix it? I have the solution here, and sort of a curious conundrum for a person saying you found a problem, you're offering to fix it for free, and all I got to do is say yes. That's very clever.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's the classic FOMO. Don't worry about it. You don't have to do it. Just keep it the way it is. Moving on. Here's my info. Call me if you want it.
Oh, this is input. Okay. So this is what it looks like in Markdown. And then I can actually throw that into the next cell. If I take the output from this, I could throw it in here. I'm just going to copy this using clone. Then I can drag this over here. I'll rename it update report. And then I just need to change these. We're going to be row number 2, same row, but we're going to do a different column. So basically all I did is I went to the next column and I used the output from this module instead of this one. So this one's taking output from this one's taking output from that one. And then I'm going to go one step further. I want to convert the markdown to HTML because I'm going to write it to a Google Doc. I'm going to take this output from the last call to ChatGPT that we did, that it was output in markdown format. I'm putting it in the markdown slot, and it's going to convert it to HTML. And then the last step, I'm going to create a Google Doc. This creates a Google document from HTML format. I'm going to name it this business name. Let's see, didn't I get the business name?
Bill Hell Plumbing on the top where it says result. Bill Hell Plumbing under result.
Is it?
Just underneath where.
Oh, here we go. I got the name though before, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to call this, because normally I'd pull the business name out, but it's not clean enough to actually make a document name out of it. I'm just going to call it document, demo document. And then for the content, I have to do some HTML things, some tags. I have to wrap them in HTML tags in order for this to work. So I'm going to put the content, it's the HTML that we got from the markdown, and I'll choose a folder. Yeah, so I'm going to run this whole thing. Basically what we just did is we updated the report cell, which is going to be this one, column C, and then we're going to write that output to a Google Doc. So I'll just run this whole thing. So this updated. Now I have all that in markdown, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense right now, but if I go look at, I actually created a Google document. Let me refresh this. There's the Google document that it output to this folder. So I've got the whole report with suggestions. So it doesn't have a clear headline. Here are the suggestions. Copy's cluttered and jumps between different topics quickly. Here are the suggestions. And it looks like it's doing ADA. Yeah, A-I-D. A. Call to action buttons are repetitive. And then it's suggesting some more CTAs there. Conversion rate optimization, simplify language, consistency, put some testimonials on there, do some urgency and scarcity, value proposition. Pretty long report for a couple simple prompts. Now, if I want to do a report for every single one on the row, or in that column, I can change this range, and it's going to be A2 to A6 is the range. So I can just put A6. Let's do A3 to A6 since we already did A2. Now if I run this, it'll go through the remaining rows. There's the first one. And you can see how many times it executes by looking up here. Each one of these is executed one time. It's writing the doc for that one, and then it's started on the second one. And then if I go to my drive, I can see that it's writing. It's done some more demo documents. That one's for Anderson Plumbing. Not as long. Let's see, that one's not as long either. But if I wanted to improve on this, I could include these, like pick the best one and include that as an example of what I want to see in the prompt. So I would say, please use this one as an example, and it would be more consistent.
Chris, if you assume for a moment just that you had a kind of an estimating mechanism here, it would seem, in other words, looking at these, it might be a complex logic, but to generate a proposal, if you could establish what the level of effort is, that would correspond to somebody's task. But that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube, and I actually have him listed. I'm going to give you guys this list of resources. This guy, Nick Sarev, when he's doing closing calls, he's filling out a form while he's on the call. And it launches an automation that shoots out a proposal that gets to the client before he even gets off the phone. And he uses this similar kind of thing, where he can just trigger this automation with a form. It generates a proposal, and it sends them a link to that proposal with a payment link and signature. There's this thing called Panda Docs that's, let's see.
Yeah, it's
It's
familiar with that. It's a like
yeah,
DocuSign. It's similar. It's like
right.
sign a contract.
And then if you want to get really sophisticated, there's this Appify. Well, I think they call it Apify, but I think it's API-Fi. I don't know. But they have this store with where people have built these scrapers that pretty much do all the work that I just showed you. And you buy credits, they're execution credits, and you basically can plug in Make into, they have a little Make module that I guess these little scrapers are called actors. You can actually run them and they perform various scraping activities on whatever you want to do, whether it's LinkedIn. Let's see what else.
Extensibility. You do not need to know how to write every complicated blueprint. You just simply, find out that this is what's possible and go shopping.
Right. And then once you load up the credits for these, you just run them and you can run them from Make. Here's a Reddit scraper. That one's pretty cool. Let's see. What do I got here? So if you want to learn to use Make and do some more sophisticated things like the proposal example, go check out his website. He's Nick Sarev on YouTube, and then he's got a video here too. I'll provide this to you in the recording, in a reply to the recording, that it basically teaches you how to use this Apify to do scraping. So anybody have any questions?
You actually raise a good point, and actually, Gobi, you said something interesting too. Yeah, we could shop, I think, to our heart's content and never be done shopping, actually, to find tools that do this. I think something was posed about just prompting in general. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize is sometimes the easier that any of this is being made, from my own learning experience, I started to lose sight of actually what's really happening, meaning it was dumbing me down instead of making me smarter. And not to say, like, that expression, well, you drive your car, you really need to know how it works. Maybe you don't need to know how to do the, nitty gritty of it, but you should kind of maybe know how the parts come together. So it seems like it's a kind of a mixed answer in terms of, yeah, good to know where you can get it done the easiest, but it seems like it's also equally good to know if you had to pull it together yourself, you actually have the logical and business acumen, logic and acumen actually do the construct of it, which I would think would be the kind of the cornerstone of a CAIO. Is that's the value prop in the end, the architectural thinking, the land, looking at the whole thing. Anyway, I think it's more of a comment than anything more.
I'll just double back on that, what you said. So now that you've seen you've seen this Make installation, and let me just take an example, right? We've got Kim here on the call, and we're going to be doing her capstone review for a final project soon. And one of the questions is like, hey, I come from, CFO background, I'm not the techie in the group here. Like, do I actually need to roll my sleeves up and get into doing this kind of Make stuff? The answer is absolutely no. But sitting in on a call like this and understanding that that's possible, if before, and I don't know how much experience she has in playing around or looking at some of the trainings we have in previous weeks, but if she's never seen or been exposed to this, you just don't know what's possible. Now, moving from okay, I never want to do that job, but I certainly need 3 quivers in my, arrows that can, or arrows in my quiver that I can use when I need that, sharp tool. And I would even venture to say you don't need to go on a shopping spree and go buy up a 1,000 tokens at something like AFI or any of these other like extensible ways to build on top of Zapier or build on top of any of these other tools. But even just like a 45-minute, walking down the aisles in the candy store and seeing what these things do, paying attention, it means that you can go, oh, okay, I know there's a marketplace there. I've looked at, a dozen or more of these things. They solve varying problems. I don't need to buy the credits today, but if I'm in a real world business scenario tomorrow and I need to know how like that is possible and light bulbs are going off, the difference maker will be at the 30,000 foot view as a CAIO. You're going, hey, we need to have a guy who's going to be able to do Make, and he needs to be able to like know APIs and do some low code, no code solutions. We're going to go to a site like this. We're going to grab some stuff off the shelf. It's going to speed up the production time. If you didn't know that, you might say, we need a guy who can go and build this stuff, and you hire a guy who really doesn't know much about it and doesn't know this extensibility function. Is he going to try and build out this grand master plan when you could have just got a $29 or $39 plugin off the shelf that would have sped up the entire process. So it's about knowing what is out there and what's possible, and then use it when you need it. Anyway, back to you, Chris.
There's another guy on YouTube that does a lot of content builds. So like syndication stuff with Make, repurposing, all that kind of stuff. He's on YouTube. He has really good free information on YouTube, but he's built most of this stuff, and he runs a school group that has all of his automations. So he'll build them on YouTube and demonstrate how he builds them. But if you actually if you want access to those builds, you can go to the community and he provides them all there. Of course, you got to pay for the community. I think it's like $99 a month. But he's got a whole content generation system. I think this might be one of them. That's what it looks like. But you could actually purchase that. He has some systems that you can purchase, and then if you really want to get into the weeds, you can go join his school group and get access to all of the stuff that he demonstrates on YouTube. I'll provide the link for that too.
I'll just add also real quick, there's another value in looking at what these tools can do, because you may be sitting here watching Chris build out a web scraper for a particular reason that he demoed today, but it might trigger something in your brain where you can all of a sudden say, oh, wait a minute, I could use a web scraper that would do this, this, and this, and this instead. And you're just changing what data you're getting from the site. You're changing how you manipulate it. You're changing what the query is inside ChatGPT. So don't get hung up on the tool or get hung up on the use case that's being presented. Look at the capabilities of the tool and figure out how to adapt that to the real world problems that you're working on and trying to solve.
Oh, sorry, Karan, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, the question is, are we scraping only the home page, or is it possible to scrape every page for that particular site, including dynamic page, and maybe if they have a shopping cart, is it like a complete whole, whatever the pages they have in the site, is that the scraping that we did now, or it's only the main, the landing page?
Just the main landing page. If you wanted to do that, you could do recursive scraping, which would go to the home page, get all the links off of that home page, and then go scrape those. And then it would do the same thing recursively, right? So you could scrape the whole site.
Oh, okay, it's possible. Okay.
Yeah.
But the only thing is, how do we know all the options? See, we know the site, we can go and click one by one all the options so that it takes the next page. So will it be any tool or the option that takes all the links under that particular site?
Yeah, you'd have to build an extra step that would go recognize all those links, pull all the links, and then go to those links and scrape those links. So it would be a recursive routine that would do that.
Great, but getting all those links, is it easy? Some small, whatever the tool that you picked up, get all those links, or you have to write custom to get all the links?
If I was going to scrape it with Make, I would use what's called regular expressions, and it matches the pattern of a URL. And it would just pull those off the page and then go to those.
Nice.
And that would, just for those that don't understand the regular expressions, I mean, basically you're saying, here's the link we're giving you in one cell, column A, which is, let's say it's mywebsite.com, and you hit the page and it pulls out all that HTML, and maybe there's outbound links that go to like 10 other, websites that are totally different from mywebsite.com. You don't want to build a Google bot that's going to scrape, the entire internet on your credit card. You want it to stop at, only recognize this, not any outbound. That's one thing that I will just throw a cautionary, piece out there. You can get into the weeds on this stuff and you can be experimental. If your credit card is strapped to that, not only just the token size of what's going on inside of the API connection that you have with OpenAI, but even just on the usage cycles, if you let something just go and go and go, and you're like, well, this is awesome. Oops, I just scraped, 10,000 profiles. There are ways in which you can prevent throttling and not get into hot water. But, we had a scenario in 2023 where nobody was paying attention to it. And, there goes like a $4,000 credit card bill. And it's like, oops, the programmer's asleep in India. Nobody knows exactly how to fix the problem. So yeah, there is definitely some hot water to get into, and be wary of that. There's a way to say like when your account credit runs out, don't auto renew, and that's one safety zone inside of Make. That if you're just experimenting with stuff and you're cutting your teeth for the first time, maybe don't toggle the switch to just rebill me every time we run out of credits.
Quick follow on to Karan was asking, was that a full, like Chris, that characterization to like, you got a web page and there's say 5 different links to a web page. What was my understanding that the regular expression was designed to take you from the first page to the downstream ones, but stop at the end. But you have to set that up using a feature called regular expression to take you from the start to the finish. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it would. So it's pattern matching.
Pattern matching.
So
Okay.
it would pick out every URL on the page, and then to avoid
Okay.
what Segovia is talking about, I would in that pattern matching, I would limit it to just the domain name that I'm on, so that it wouldn't go off the domain name.
I know you have a real story, Segovia, about something that stood out. 30 seconds.
Yep.
There's a program manager role at Airtable, and I'm in the program management side of things, running engagements and such. And I was picturing this if I actually was a little further along at the moment, whereby I could contact that company and actually showcase, something of the nature of leveraging an automation using Airtable, as we just saw a moment ago, and obviously have a value prop, from the start and the get go. But the second part of it is, there was some discussion earlier about like, so what? I think, the CFO, I think it was, you mentioned somebody getting ready to do a capstone. Okay. I know for a fact that anytime I've gone into program projects and you actually kind of know what's going on, your credibility goes up 10,000%. If you can't even talk the language or know what the framework you're working in, you're an outsider right from the start, and you got a lot more to prove. So, Chris, really great stuff. Thank you. I'll get excited just seeing what I think I could do with this. I just need to borrow a few brain cells from you and maybe about 20 more hours and sort of fast track it. Can you put that through online for me? I'll just download it and plug it in.
Yeah,
Back
I'm
into the
actually gonna.
matrix.
I'll actually provide this example too, and maybe at some point I'll cover regular expressions, I guess. But there's some projects, I guess, that Chief AI Officer is working on that I think we might tackle some of those little projects.
Scratch the itch.
Yeah.
Yeah. One question that I think you can address first, and I can dovetail on, Chris. Moto's asking, like, what is the difference between why you would go with Make and why you would go with Zapier? Both can do many of the same things, but there's time and places for where, you'd use one or the other. Do you have a go-to?
Yeah. First of all, Make is visual and easier to understand for me. I'm a visual person. But also cost is the big one. Make is 10 times cheaper than Zapier.
On a
or
per
Zapier
cycle
or whoever.
usage for tokens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot cheaper.
So if you have like Zapier, I always have called Zapier the glue of the internet. It basically lets you glue services for people that don't have, an army of programmers behind them. It's like, I've got a coder who knows how to speak APIs and can roll your own projects with, and how to speak the programming ease to even ask for what it is you're looking for. Zapier is a way to like say, I don't need a programmer. I can just get in here. Now, you can even find people that are just really, really good at Zapier. If you're trying to run something where it doesn't happen that many times, hey, an inbox just came in, we're getting random emails here and there. Somebody signs up on the front page of our website, which we don't sell billions of products. We sell, smaller quantities. It's okay to use Zapier to make this connection because they're low frequency. But if we're running to so we use Zapier in our business for things that happen between, go high level and making connections in the circle, because they just don't happen more than a few times a day. And, the cost and the ease of use is very simple. But when we want to take, for example, when we're building out the prompt improver, and we have also a tool that's built in, it's built in Make, but the interface for our staff, they never need to go inside of Make. Essentially, they use a spreadsheet, much to what you just described, and in column A, they put a prompt, and then, they wait, and a couple seconds later, prompt, gets improved, prompt happens, prompt next thing happens, and then, they'll check something for an audit trail, and then that goes and uploads it through an API call, which goes through a Zap. So we're using both Make and Zap to be able to do importation into our prompt vault software. And it's because, we might put in 500 prompts, and that's getting used, and each one of those becomes another piece down the chain, and it's far less at 10% the cost. I know Andrew a few weeks ago, he actually made reference to another tool that's kind of coming out. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Maybe Lee can remember, but it's basically a Make competitor, and it's even cheaper than Make. So like this is a game where cloud and the AI LLM models, they're going to get bigger, they're going to get cheaper. It's commoditized right now. It's the worst it's ever going to be. And a year from now, or when we think about how big computers were in the 80s and the 70s, it was like the size of a room, and now it fits in your pocket, and it's 100 times or 1,000 times more powerful. So they'll get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as this stuff just becomes like electricity, and you don't have to think about it. But in the meantime, if you're setting up like high level strategy where you've got thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of lines that are getting processed day by day, you want to use something that's going to be cost effective, because that's part of your job as a CIO, is not to pick tools that will bleed out and cost a lot of project money.
There are 15 to 20 competitors to Zapier based on a quick Google search. So there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I wanted to, before any more other questions, and I don't know, Chris, if you have a hard stop, we're over the top of the hour. I just wanted to get a sense of feedback from the people who are remaining. I know we had a few people duck out, to walk the dog and so forth, from who I can see on screen, or anybody want to just say, raise your hand or put a 1 in the chat if you have attended any of like the last 6 weeks, or what, like maybe the last 2 months of calls with Sean, who was on our Tuesday call, and what is the differential between the call that we're doing now? I know it's like the pacing was, we were at a level 10 and you needed a Babelfish to understand probably what was going on, or you needed a degree in this stuff. I think, Chris is able to really bring it to a level where anybody can step on the escalator without feeling like they're off balance right away. So I just wanted to read the room, and I'm seeing Teresa's nodding yes. We got some other people. So 1 means, I guess you were definitely in Sean's. If you want to throw a 1 to 5 on a rating, or maybe a 1 to 10 on a rating, let's go with 1 to 10.
Well, if
For
I
Chris,
could say something,
please say.
I
Please
think
say.
without even looking at a scale, and Chris knows this because we're friends, that when I first got into Sean's webinars, he knows a lot. He does, but he doesn't know how to convey that information. And that's the downfall that for him, is that he just doesn't know how to say in a step-by-step method that someone can follow clearly what is happening. Whereas Chris is completely the opposite. He's able to describe the situation and then show you step by step what's going to unfold. And it's clearly spoken. So I appreciate that about Chris's way of teaching.
I think the weekly calls are going to be, obviously we've got Christopher's rubber arm twisted behind him for indefinite perpetuity, seriously.
I can help with that.
But I think, there's times where, you need to pull out the super genius for some really hard problems. And I think just as a community, we need to, we might pull Sean back in for some, workshops where we do like a 2 or 3 hour, like really high level workshop.
Yeah.
But there'll be prerequisites that say you got to know X and you got to know Y, otherwise you're just going to be lost. Right. And I hope that, over the next, say, 6 or 10 weeks, that we'll be able to bring the community at large up to another level, so that, we're not just kind of building Lego blocks with a few, things, but we're starting to really expand upon that. And I think that'll be where things get exciting. And then we have visions to actually start like creating projects. So an idea that I want to call out to Curtis, I don't know if anybody was takers, but I think from my interpretation of the comment, he was like, if anybody wants to go deeper and like do what we call in programming tandem coding, where, you might have programmer A sit down with programmer B, and, we're going to go and smash on this problem together. Maybe you know some tricks and I know some tricks, and the logic flow, we're going to like play around. And, whether you're side by side working at a Amazon, door desk, or you're across the country and you're on Zoom, tandem work can really elevate your learning curve. So if you feel like you want to play more in this particular one, or even the last one we did 2 weeks ago, and, we don't have a structure right now for bringing together, like, I would call it like an accountability or study partner or something like that. You guys I would encourage and welcome you to reach out and find little dyads or triads of groups that, you guys can form and start to do things. And you'll learn from each other a lot faster than you would just, banging your head against the glass, week after week on your own. And over time, as we grow and develop as a training organization, we will be putting infrastructure in place that says, hey, for people that are onboarding in the cohort X, if you want to raise your hand and get, paired up with other people that are in the fast lane, this is how you do it. But in the meantime, these are ideas that we can start to bubble and boil as we raise the temperature in the room.
They call that mod programming. I think there's a whole bunch of names, but
Yeah.
great idea. Thank you for covering that. I think I know for a fact I learned so much better when I can say, I don't get what just happened there. And somebody goes, well, duh, it's right here. And then you go back and forth. It's very humbling, but friendly. It's a small audience. It's very empowering. Good idea, guys. Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions before we let Chris go and eat dinner?
I have one question, and it's just broadly for another time, Chris, just to kind of plant the seed for a conversation. And it may not belong here a little bit, my comment, Segovia, I'm trying to figure out where to be. There's so many great points of entry in the program that it's a little easy to get lost. It's like, the great mall, but which store do I shop in first? So like for prompt engineering, as I made that comment earlier, some of the things that I would love to see at some point is just like how to leverage frameworks. And I think in the context of prompting, there's so many frameworks, and I see ADA's, leveraged in one context. There's other frameworks, ITIL, there's CISSP, and these are different types of frameworks, but they in themselves represent kind of like what's considered best practices. And it would seem that if the CAIO program was going to evangelize their, superior qualifications, that they would be leveraging those kinds of aspects to their value prop. Because I most often see when you're looking for employment anymore, people are looking for certifications, PMPs, CISSPs, ITIL version 4, and CISA. And all of them correlate to some sort of domain expertise. So perhaps, I guess, maybe Chris, what the reason I brought that up is I presume that you can kind of refer to perhaps a chat GPT that if you know how to create those, that you can bring those kinds of things into this from out of an analytical perspective. Would that be an accurate statement? Or is that a confusing question?
Building GPTs.
So if you built a GPT to say leverage, say PMI, simple example, and there's a whole body of knowledge that corresponds to that, to bring that sort of logic in, it would seem that you could use the Make framework or a tool like this to kind of extract out those nuggets of outcome or outputs to continue to use as you build kind of your end game value proposition and proposal at the other end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I've taken other people's frameworks, like Russell Brunson's Perfect Webinar framework. I basically took the transcript from his YouTube videos and built a GPT and said, hey, what are the steps of this framework and how would I build a webinar out of this? And you could automate the whole process based on what the product and service is. So yeah, there's all kinds of use cases for that type of thing. You could do the same thing with any framework.
And I would challenge you, our job here would be to teach you how to, create the custom GPT so you know how to do this. So you don't need to go and find here's the 5 you can list off today and what happens when you stumble on another one. But given the volume and velocity of GPTs that are out there, and now with Claude coming on, and they're all starting to create their own like flavor of how and what they call these things. But if you just go to the GPT side and you type in a framework, probability is there's already somebody who has created a custom GPT that is the entire vertical knowledge of that particular framework, whether you're in a learning development and curriculum design department or you're in the marketing and you're using Ada. There's all kinds of things. So I would say before you go and roll your own, unless you just are trying to just experiment with the creation process, look out there on the landscape and then go, there's nothing, I can't find it. Or I tried the 3 that came up in the search results and they were less than satisfactory based on my needs. Therefore, I will roll my own because I need something that's very, very hyper specific.
When you say search, Segovia, what comes to mind as far as that's a big question, a great suggestion, but a big
yeah, sorry, this would be more than to cover in this, but if you just go into ChatGPT, go up to the top to GPTs and hit search, you'll find that, if you type in any acronym-based framework, you'll probably find that there's a GPT with that already in place, unless it's so abstract that nobody in this room or, has ever heard of it before. Like, in that case, if I made up an acronym on the spot, maybe you wouldn't find it because it it's in my head and it doesn't have enough body of knowledge out there on the internet.
Oh,
I
But
use Perplexity.
go ahead.
Sorry, I
Perplexity.
use Perplexity to find whether or not an app exists or not as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Segovia.
Yep.
Yeah,
All
if
right.
you just hit Explore GPTs in the left sidebar, Chat GPT, it says Explore GPTs, and that'll take you to a search window. You can pump in some framework acronyms into that and see what it shows.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.